Welcome, everyone, to Speaking of Strong Style. It's another edition of the show where we talk about all the news and issues surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm Stephen Conway. I'm the WWE and New Japan writer for FightGameMedia.com. And with me, as always, Jeremy Finestone, another contributor at FightGameMedia.com. Jeremy, plenty of things to talk about. One of the great things about New Japan is that it just keeps rolling with interesting things this time of year. And we've got a pay-per-view level show to talk about, some tournament finals and title shots to talk about, and then we're building right up to another major event. So it's plenty to keep us entertained. I hope you've been enjoying the shows like I have. How have you been doing with it?
I've been doing pretty good. I feel like depending on who you talk to, the world is following with New Japan, or they are business as usual.
Right.
It should be really interesting to see what the general consensus of the direction of New Japan over the next couple of months, because you're either all in or you're all out right now,
Yeah.
and there are some divisive decisions just because it's had a lot of attention on it, and we're here to kind of dive right in and figure it all out.
It's even more interesting than usual just because the fate of another major promotion seems to be tied to New Japan. Like these two companies, AEW and New Japan, have sort of tied their shoelaces together, and they're either going to run or they're going to trip, and we're going to find out in about a week or so. Once all these numbers are in, it's looking like well, let's just say it's going to be intriguing, isn't it? Because I think there's some people sweating over whether this was the best idea or not. After all, as a fan, I'm looking forward to it, but business wise, they might be shaking their heads after it.
You know what? The thing that really I find interesting is that when you watch AEW, you feel like they're on their track and everything is according to plan and everything's laid out and it feels smooth and seamless. So when you're watching New Japan programming go on to AEW and it feels awkward and stilted and not quite what you think it's supposed to be in terms of that maximum effect upon the viewer, it's jarring because we're conditioned to something else with these two brands that work well independently of each other. And so I think a lot of people, including myself, just assumed that the work together would be seamless the first time around, but it's pretty clear that they have a politics and learning curves ahead and behind them to take into account.
Yeah, and they're going through their own things. Of course, we've mentioned many times every edition of the show, but it's worth mentioning again because you see it. That New Japan needs new blood, and they're working on it. They're trying. It's been a stale product in that we've seen all the matchups over the last few years because poor Gato, the booker for New Japan, has been stuck with basically the same roster because due to COVID and various other restrictions, they haven't been able to bring in the outside talent that kind of gives that extra spice to the shows and freshens up the matchups. He hasn't been able to do that. On the other side, AEW has been thrown into chaos by whatever is going on with MJF and CM Punk's injury. So two of the most compelling characters in that show's history are gone. And, a couple of weeks ago, we had this thing where they announced this all Atlantic title, which does not need to exist. They have chaos regarding a very poorly booked show regarding who's going to get a shot at this interim title, which also probably shouldn't exist. And they have their own issues too. So as they're trying to book a coherent show, and they've been failing a couple weeks, what do you think on the status and the unclear status of the main events for Forbidden Door?
The thing about the show itself is I feel like everyone was all in on the show, pardon the term, before we ever got a card. And there were assumptions that we were going to get dream matches that you would never get before. And people's expectations have been created and defined themselves, and they were almost unrealistic, and it's hard to get back down to a level of normalcy when it comes to that. So personally, when I'm taking all that into account, I'm excited for the possibilities of the main event. There are things going on with Jay White that seem ambiguous and possible and fun. It could be Okada, could be Page and Cole in a three-way, but there was a main event tease that I'm going to ask you about, and that is on BTE. They teased Kenny Omega. Do you think that a Kenny Omega match could happen on 4 days' notice against Jay White?
Of course, Kenny Omega coming back is going to be one of the biggest things to happen to AEW all year.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting idea. Do you throw that out there on only 4 days' notice? If I'm Tony Khan, I feel like I would wait and do that a month ahead and have that announcement on Dynamite a month ahead, that at the next big pay-per-view on Labor Day weekend, it's going to be Kenny Omega's big return. He's only going to return once here.
Mm-hmm.
You only get one shot at Kenny Omega's first match back. Now, if they're feeling that stressed out about the buy rate for this show, they might throw it out there and hope it pops. And it probably will certainly help. But it'll certainly help.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that will buy the show that wouldn't have normally. I feel like it could be used more effectively with a longer, bigger buildup and weeks of interviews of Kenny and Don Callis out there hyping up his return, that this is going to happen and it's going to return things back to the way they should be with Kenny Omega on top of the world again. And just the idea of coming out there and just like, oh, it's Sunday, better hurry.
Yeah.
Again, if they're really worried about how Forbidden Door is going to do, then perhaps. I still think you're not quite maximizing Kenny Omega's return by doing so.
It feels like a hot shot.
It could be also now one way to do it that might do great for you is to have whatever title match you want, whether it's the IWGP title match, whether it's the AEW match, and have Kenny Omega come out and challenge the winner. So he's still part of Forbidden Door and still a major event. And it would remind people that didn't buy Forbidden Door, probably shouldn't skip an AEW pay-per-view.
No, I mean, yeah.
And that's a possibility. That might be a smarter way to use Kenny Omega than having him wrestle on 4 days' notice to the fans.
I am not saying that that's a possibility. It just seems very bold of BTE the week before to hotshot some type of suggestion without any build. But at the same time, it tracks fantastically with the way that they've been building this pay-per-view. Like, it's awkward. It's out of nowhere.
True.
It's pretty wild. So, okay, so that's one possibility. Another possibility is a 3-way or a 4-way, and the Okada possibility. If Jay White were to defend in a 3 or a 4-way, would that detract from your enjoyment, or would it be contingent on the people in the match?
Contingent on the people in the match. So, for instance, if it ends up being a 4-way with Jay White, Adam Cole, Adam Page, and Okada, I'm okay with that. I mean, I think those 4 guys would put together something pretty special. And certainly we've just seen that White and Okada are capable of great things together. Adam Cole's a wonderful worker. Page can probably keep up with them as best he can for most of that match. So I think he could do it. I'm not always the biggest fan of triple threats and 4-ways and fatal 5-ways and 6-pack challenges and things. But these 4 guys could probably do a pretty good job of it. And it's a way to get 4 really big stars between the 2 companies on the show. I know that Okada is known by AEW fans. Perhaps not all of them have watched a whole lot of him, but I don't think it'll take much for them to realize how good he is. And certainly Adam Cole and Adam Page are over with AEW fans. So I think they could come along for the ride on it and it would get over. So I would be fine with that. I'd be fine with seeing all 4 of those major stars. It just feels empty without Okada on there. It just does to me. I mean, Okada is the face of the IWGP title for several years, and we have Tanahashi. We have that one. That's an important one. But without Shingo Takagi, without Naito, and without a lot of other stars due to, like you said, the political problems that are going on, versus anyone who works regularly for AAA can't be on this show because New Japan works with CMLL, and CMLL and AAA are blood enemies, never to be seen together. So here there's some hoops that they have to jump through in order to get this in the ring even. So, but having it without Okada would really detract from the event to me. It would really make it feel a little bit small. And Okada's not doing anything. Like when we look over these road shows, I mean, he's teaming with Tenzan and Makabe and Young Lions in matches. You know, he's just on the losing side of matches as Young Lions are being pinned. He's not in the middle of anything right now. It just doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't be on this show in a major way.
Yeah, it feels like they are misreading the audience significantly if they bring a New Japan show without the Rainmaker Okada.
Mm-hmm.
So do they take that risk and jeopardize future events? I tend to doubt it.
Yeah.
It seems like the most logical thing, but if you're telling me right now spend $50 on this show and you don't know Okada's on it, you know, I get it why people are hesitant.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally do. I don't begrudge anybody. And if you hear after the fact that it's a great show and you want to spend the 50 after the fact, like, you can still do that. There's no deadline to watch this show and enjoy it. But I do think that come Sunday, there's going to be a lot of people very, very interested in watching that show, regardless of whether it's one person or the next. I'm just generally confident that there's a plan in place to put a banger show on.
Oh, I think it'll be good. And we're going to find out Wednesday if we're getting Bryan Danielson on this show. Apparently that announcement's going to be made. Hopefully he's cleared. Hopefully he's going to wrestle Zack Sabre Jr. That's one of the dream matches for me. Yeah, this is one of the matches I've always wanted to see. If they do this, I'm in. They can do whatever they want with the rest of the card. I mean, that's two guys that were just made. Right? What?
Here, take my money.
Yeah. Well, isn't it the Bryan Danielson Technical Wrestler Award that Zack Sabre has been winning in the Wrestling Observer poll for the last few years? So we got the guy that the award's named after, wrestling the guy who always wins the award these days. I don't think he did last year, but it's been like Zack won a whole bunch in a row of the Bryan Danielson Award. Who doesn't want to see this? So
that feels like the Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels match of our generation.
Yeah, and then you get things like, I'm looking forward to FTR against Cobb and Okan and Roppongi Vice. That'll be a heck of a wrestling match. It's been built up so long, Moxley and Tanahashi is a master, one of the greats, all-time greats. Moxley is in a point in his career where he's having terrific matches with a lot of different types of people and a lot of different styles. There's a lot to like on this card. And if Okada does end up in the main event there, it puts it over the top for me. I was in from the beginning. But like you said, the shut up and take my money match might be announced on Wednesday. So there's good stuff to be had here. And that 4-way that looks like it's going to be Ishii and Malachi Black getting in there with who's already in that match. I'm sorry. I should have had that in front of me.
Miro, Ishii, yes. I believe it is Malachi Black, or no, he's going to be, because
he's going to be
wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and then Pac.
Yes, of course, Pac. I mean, those combinations of those four guys, that should be wonderful. I mean, anything with Ishii and Miro will be interesting. The two powerhouses. Pac can do anything with anyone. And and Malachi Black's a terrific worker. So
let me ask you this. Excited. I want to go back to the IWGP. Was the last time the IWGP title was defended in more than a one-on-one match the Cody Rhodes match?
I think so. Yeah, it's been it's not something that New Japan does.
Non-traditional.
Not traditionally, yeah, not definitely a non-traditional thing, but it's non-traditional pay-per-view. That's okay.
Yeah, so I feel like we are very, very lucky to be getting Jon Moxley and Hiroshi Tanahashi at this pay-per-view. In a lot of ways, I'm looking forward to this more than I am rumored matches and matches that have already been announced, is the best way I could put it. Mainly because I'm not sure Tanahashi has really had that feature match that people in the States have seen. Like, the legend of Tanahashi is greater than the amount of people that have studiously followed his career, is the best way I would say. That a lot of people know who Tanahashi is, but if they are saying that they have gone out of their way to seek out Tanahashi matches, which are not easy to do. You have to either find them on New Japan on Access. You have to pay a subscription to watch these matches. Sometimes they're on YouTube, but you have to go out of your way. So if this is the opportunity for a new generation to really understand what greatness that Tanahashi is, I am more excited for that because, Moxley talked a good game, but this is a match he's wanted for a very long time. And if you don't think that he's pulling out all the stops to make this better than any of the indie, dirty, every style match that he loves to have, then, man, you don't know who John Moxley is either. You should watch that match for him too.
Well, and it's an interesting styles clash, and just the way that Moxley wrestles versus the way Tanahashi wrestles. But if you saw Moxley in the G1 a few years ago, he can do this. Like, his style can be melded into that New Japan style pretty effectively. Like, he had some terrific matches during that tournament. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm puzzled by Orange Cassidy and Will Ospreay. I like a roster full of people, and it's Orange Cassidy.
I have a theory about this one,
Orange
and I
Cassidy.
think it was a sense of humor match that was going to be made. I don't think Juice Robinson was supposed to lose that title, and I think it was supposed to be an Orange Juice match.
I feel silly now for not thinking of that before. An Orange
Cassidy versus Juice Robinson for the IWGP title.
But if you're gonna have Will Ospreay, for the love of God, like, if somebody and he's gonna lose. I mean, Orange Cassidy's not gonna win the IWGP, US title. Then put Dante Martin in it. Let's do Ospreay and Dante Martin flip all over the place. I mean, who would want to see that?
Orange Cassidy is 100% a bigger star. You've already had that kind of match with Nick Wayne, and you don't want Dante Martin to look lesser than Nick Wayne right now, and they're not going to have the balls. I don't know if they would be able to have that balls out match on the middle of a crossover card. This is not the opportunity for Dante Spotlight in that respect. I think there's politics there. I like the idea of Orange Cassidy mainly because he's an outlier wrestler. He has an ability. He has an ability to go fast and move fast, and we just don't see it enough to really recognize that the dude can go in the ring. It's just the presentation of him is such that we kind of forget that. But when he's in the match with Ospreay, like, I'm sure people will be talking about, can you just believe what we just saw kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know. I still think, I don't know. Orange is like,
it feels like a missed opportunity. I get it.
I think of one of the 5 best wrestlers in the world standing there while a guy like taps him on the shins with his shoe, and I'm just like, oh God. I mean, this could be Darby Allin. This could be.
He could be getting a hidden blade too at the same time. Like, you're gonna love it when he gets that hidden blade and the sunglasses go falling off.
Orange will probably do something fun, and I'll probably enjoy it, and I'll probably be sitting here in 2 weeks just saying, well, I was wrong about that. I don't know. My gut feeling, I just would rather see it. There are a couple other guys I'd rather see here.
Okay, so when I think about Forbidden Door, I like to think of Marvel Cinematic Universe, where they escalated the level of crossover per like the franchise, where it was escalating. We can't have Endgame and Infinity War right at the beginning. We're kind of in the Civil War phase, where the things are kind of like, we're simmering some issues. Things are going to be building. This is supposed to be a long-term partnership. So I'd love to see long-term feuds happen where, Ospreay, takes out Cassidy, but in 6 months where they have a thing, maybe they have a go back where Cassidy has a new friend and he's a really talented wrestler. And then it goes into that kind of move forward mentality where they keep the rivalries between the brands in existence in some sort of way. So if you started it like this, even though this wasn't according to plan, but keep it going in an engaging way, you can turn it from a 2 on the interest level by, keeping us invested in the long term.
And I think probably to go toward your point, there is time for all that. None of the people we're talking about, Darby Allin, Orange Cassidy, Will Ospreay, are particularly old. Tanahashi is over 40 years old. Moxley's 40 years old. some of these matches need to happen now, or they just simply might not happen. And that's the thing we talked about 2 weeks ago, is like Moxley and Tanahashi just get the match in the damn ring finally. We also found out that Tony Khan had been trying to keep it from happening until he had a piece of it, and now he does, and now he's willing to let it go. And that's being a businessman. I will respect that.
As he stepped back and the dust settles, the truth reveals itself.
There it is. There it is. So, yeah, I mean, he's smart enough to have wanted a piece of the big match. I understand that idea. The other matches do have, you figure you can do that a couple of years down the line, and those guys will still be young and still be stars, whereas others maybe not. And hopefully they are. Hopefully they are. But you never really know. And goodness knows Tanahashi's body has taken a spectacular pounding over the years, and he hasn't rested as much as he probably should have, and he hasn't taken it as easy as he could have. And all that stuff is starting to pile up. You can see it the way he moves, but he's so smart in the ring that
he's had 6 months that have just been like, okay, man, we get it. You're really good, even though these matches that you're in are not super, super important on the card. I'm really glad that they kept him very safe and protected in that qualifier match.
Goto took good care of him.
Very safe. Like, just get in, get out. Surgical. Great.
Yeah. Good solid match, but there was very little doubt as to how that was going to go. So we had some New Japan only shows last couple of days. They're called road shows. They're coming. They went through Metropolitan Tokyo for the most part. All 3 that were on New Japan World were in Metropolitan Tokyo. The last 2 at Korakuen Hall had the 2 title matches that would normally have been at Dominion. But an interesting quote I thought from Takahashi, Hiromu Takehashi, the challenger for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title, where he said he would rather main event Korakuen Hall against Taiji Ishimori than be in a mid-card match at Dominion, which I thought was a good spin on the situation.
Wasn't that
they felt like they needed main events, and they did have a big crowd for that show. Now that the tag team title match had some empty seats right there, but they pretty much filled up to Korakuen Hall, so I mean it carried a little weight.
Wasn't that an interesting mentality to have in a presentation? I read that, I think, in the early morning this morning or yesterday morning, and I was like, ooh, you sassy little guy, huh? Ooh, I agree with you. Be the main event.
It's a good twist on whether he actually believes it, or if he's doing it because the company wants him to, or I don't know. Maybe he does. But it is an interesting take on that he'd rather be main eventing a show than having a match in the middle of a card, and that's where it probably would have been positioned. The way that they handle things. So and as it turned out, as we expected, might have gotten a little more time in Korakuen Hall than it would have gotten on a big Dominion show. And that match was wonderful with Ishimori. Ishimori retained, and we're going to get to what happened right after that. But a fabulous match, a fabulous main event. And once again, Hiromu Takahashi, I still feel, is one of the 5-10 best wrestlers in the world, Jeremy.
Isn't it amazing that a man like Takahashi can put a tweet out like that and carry himself like a main event star simply on the perception? There aren't a whole lot of wrestlers that can put that tweet out there and people will A, take them seriously, or B, they take themselves seriously. But when he read that tweet, when I read that tweet and he made that statement, I was like, yeah, all right, I buy that. Okay, sure. Yeah. No, that's a great mentality. Carry yourself like a champ.
And he does. And it's such a smart way for him to work his character and work his persona. He comes off like a champion or a main eventer, even if he's not the title holder. He doesn't fade into the background when he doesn't hold the championship. He's still one of the 2-3 biggest stars in that entire division, whether he has the title or not. And it just brings a little bit more juice into anything he's in. And you see, like, every once in a while, someone will pop their head up and be a guy and Ishimori is a good example. It's like when Taiji Ishimori doesn't hold that title, he can sometimes be the 3rd or 4th guy in an 8-man tag team match with Bullet Club, but it never feels that way with Hiromu. It always feels like there's a star in the ring. And that's not a knock on Ishimori. It's just saying more of what Hiromu's been able to build with that character and the equity he's built with the fans. They love him.
You have watched him literally put his life on the line,
Yeah.
leave, take the punishment for it, do the rehab, do the work, and come back and not miss a beat. They are all in on this guy, and so am I. Like everything about the starness factor. If he turns heel, it's gonna be hard to boo him.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those things that dude is gonna be a lifelong baby face. As crazy as he wants to be, it's gonna take a lot to turn it around. And best for business. I don't know if New Japan really wants to do that with him.
No, and what we saw in the result of Taiji Ishimori beating him in a fantastic match for that title is keep the heel champion. Now, why do we keep a heel champion? Because we have someone who might be more of a pure babyface than Hiromu Takahashi coming in. Right after he won the title, he was doing his post-match speech. The winner of the main event gets to talk in New Japan, so he's on the microphone. And he was taunting El Desperado, who was doing commentary. He was on the TV Asahi feed for commentary. So he's right there at ringside in his mask, and there he's pointing at him, and Desperado standing up and pointing back. When suddenly the music hits, the time splitters, the video comes up on the board, and Korakuen Hall popped. They know they're not supposed to talk. They know they're not supposed to cheer, but there was definitely an ooh type of sound right there. And you just saw like the body language. They had a wide shot, and people were like kind of hopping in their seats a little bit. Like this is the
buzzing, the energy, the pop, the whole.
Ishimori played it like he was being haunted by a ghost of someone who had died years ago and never expected to see again. He was in shock. He looks down, and then sure enough, Kushida, back from his sojourn as a mid-carder in NXT, back
that's being kind. That is being kind.
I'm trying. He was teaming with a guy who wears a jacket all the time. It's whose entire gimmick is that he has a jacket, and he's rid of that finally. He's gone. He escaped. Thank goodness, and he's back where he belongs, and he's back as a star. And of course, they went back and forth. It was all in Japanese. We did not have any English commentary, Chris Charlton at all translating. So I have to wait a couple of days for that to come out as to what was exactly was said. But the clear implication is that he's challenged Taiji Ishimori, and you have to have a heel champion for Kushida. You just have to. He's one of the best pure baby faces out there. And this is a good combination. I don't know if we've seen a whole lot of Taiji Ishimori against Kushida. I think they were almost two ships passing in the night when Taiji Ishimori came in as Bone Soldier. I'd have to look up the exact dates of that.
I think there was a year where they might have had a couple of tournament matches and the Best of Super Juniors, that kind of thing. But in terms of like iconic matchups between the two, I don't think there's anything there there for him. I'm very excited that Kushida has a place here in New Japan. He's made it clear that he's staying in LA, and he's going to be coming overseas for all of his matches. So there's also a very real aspect of Kushida doing a lot of stateside work with Strong and that kind of thing because he's living in the area. But he also made it abundantly clear that he is going to be with New Japan for life from here on out.
Oh, that's great news. And it's such a better fit for him. And they treat him with so much more respect than WWE ever did or would. And I'm going to throw this one out there as I was watching this. Now, whether he wins this title or not, if he is affiliated with Los Angeles, if he is kind of tied in with Shibata and the LA dojo and things, does he take on Clark Connors as a possible tag team partner? Is that the alliance? Because he's going to have to join a faction because everybody has to. He and Connors kind of seem like a natural type of fit potentially down the road. Connors had a heck of a week, by the way.
Yes,
wrestled in the tournament for the All Atlantic title, which doesn't need to exist, but here it is, and so we're going to deal with it. And he put over Ishii in a terrific match to get Ishii into that Forbidden Door match. He beat Tomoaki Honma to get to Ishii, but both matches were, Honma can do what he can do, and I think Connors actually carried a lot of that match, and it was pretty good. Ishii's match was wonderful with Connors. Of course, Ishii is one of the best workers out there, but he did his part. He pulled his weight, and the fact they put him over Honma and then had him go fairly evenly with Ishii. Ishii won. You knew he was going to. But I think this company sees a lot in Clark Connors right now, and I think he's the most talented of that batch. I think there's something missing with Fredericks. Carl Fredericks. Alex Coughlin's good. I think Clark Connors is the best of them, and I think New Japan sees it too.
I think we had this conversation on one of the previous episodes where I think we were on that consensus of like, hey, this guy, I don't know when it happened, but he elevated a tier above the other two, and it showed the confidence that they had of him after the Best of the Super Juniors, because there's a number of guys that would have been qualified for this match. Nobody looked at this match and thought, what is Clark Connors doing there?
Yeah.
Even though everyone kind of knew Clark Connors wasn't winning. And so that's a fine line to walk when you're booking a match is, does this person have credibility in this match? Is this something that you want to see? Are the stakes appropriate for all of these things? And I think that match checked off all of those boxes. You know, you're watching it and you're like, okay, if I'm wizened up, Ishii should win this match. And Ishii should won the match.
Yeah.
If you're wizened up, you're looking at like Clark Connors. I don't know much about him, but when I watch him, I want to know more. And that's the kind of wrestler that he is like, you're ready to tune in the next time that he has a match and he connects with the audience. And you're gonna want to see him have that big babyface win of some type. He's a prime babyface. It's not a guy that you want to boo. It's not a guy that, I'm sure he has that potential, but the way that they have developed him is like he is on a fast track to success, more so than a lot of those other guys. But that's what that system is for. The best rise to the top, and the rest don't. And you got guys like Carl Fredericks that are lamenting that they got passed over an opportunity here, or like didn't get in the G1 and don't understand, and something like that. But
Carl Fredericks had no business in G1, none.
You know, when he made the statement, nobody knew what the G1 was going to be like. And even and like, I could imagine a dude being salty knowing that they were added 8 more spots to the G1. And I get it. Like, I may not agree, but it's one of those threshold things. Like when you're talking about Clark Connors and you're like, you see it, even though like you may not go far in the Best of Super Juniors, having him in that tournament, like, yeah, totally, I get it. When you have Carl Fredericks and you're looking at him and you're like, should he be in the G1? You're like, there's a couple other guys I'd rather in front of him, but if he were in there, I wouldn't raise a stink. He's at that kind of level. Like, it would be poor taste to say like, why is he doing it in there? What is he doing in there after, you know, he's put the work in? And if somebody at New Japan says, you know what, this guy's got it and he's going in the G1, maybe they need the G1 to prove everyone right or get proven wrong. Who knows? But we know it's not happening this year.
The junior heavyweight division got some new blood, and we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago with the Best of the Super Juniors, so you can go back and listen to that show. We went over people in more detail, but the idea of Clark Connors on the babyface side, Ace Austin on the heel side, brings to mind some real nice fresh matchups and a couple of characters who to the show that I think are really, really working right now and connecting with the crowd either positively or in that heel sense with Austin after going into Bullet Club. So I'm optimistic about the junior heavyweight division in a way I would not have said 6 months ago.
You know, speaking of names to watch in the junior heavyweight division, I don't know what Alex Zane's future is, but he's also a guy that has a bright future, maybe as a member of Chaos or just the regular stable. And then congratulations to TJP, my favorite TJP. And Francisco Akira, who I legitimately just think the world up for winning the junior heavyweight tag team titles.
Indeed,
from Master Wato and I forgot it.
Ryusuke
Taguchi and the bump butt.
Yes.
Master Wato was pinned.
The funky weapon.
The funky weapon misfired, my friend.
Yes, it did. I mean, look, this was a transitional tag team champion in that they literally won the tag team titles because Taguchi's gimmick is 69. That's where we are. We're in late 90s WWE sense of humor territory here. And they are the 69th tag team champions. Get it? Haha. So
I literally wrote Nike on the notepad next to me. I can't, I'm still a child.
Yeah. And so he was both the 69th singles champion. He's now the 69th tag team champion, Taguchi. So it was strictly a transitional thing in the first place. So Akira and TJP do make for a fine tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see upcoming who opposes them. You know, there's always the Hiromu and Bushi. There's always Desperado Kanemaru. Maybe some combination of Connors and Zayn and somebody else that could step up and challenge them. So, and it could be somebody from the Bullet Club. You have ELP and Ace Austin. Who knows? But
it does make it interesting, though. I just realized that leaves 2 junior heavyweight tag teams in United Empire, Aussie Open and these 2. Is that going to be a problem down the line?
That could come into something interesting there. That would I would enjoy that match. I think those are 4 really talented guys. But yeah,
but that is quite the stable that they're building up based off of that group of people. So TJP and Akira is one of those guys that he's on a short list of people to watch over the next year. But if he is a name everybody knows in 5 years, wouldn't be shocked at all.
Yeah, he's coming along strong. So that's been real good. So congratulations to them. A little bit of a career boost for him, I think. I mean, TJB's been a star in various organizations, but I think Akira's coming out party is going to end up being 2022, and we've seen a big part of it in the last month.
Yeah, just fantastic work by the cultivated pool from the best of the Super Juniors. Whoever put that group together, I tip my cap because I was a little skeptical at first when I saw the list, but what a couple of brackets that really delivered, and since then have continued to elevate their game.
There you go. All right. So wanted to mention one thing to all the people listening out there. We mentioned that we are contributors to Fight Game Media. Fight Game Media, of course, is a website that covers all manners of combat sports, pro wrestling. It covers MMA. It covers boxing. If there's 2 people in a ring, Fight Game Media has you covered on it. Also has a fantastic Patreon. It's very inexpensive. It's only $5 a month, and you get a lot of content on there. So there's already a lot of content on Fight Game Media. There's content on this YouTube channel that you're watching right now. You can get even more. And it's a great way. It's impossible, Jeremy, to keep track of everything. There's literally wrestling on every single night of the week. It's impossible to watch all of it and not be some sort of shut in with some social issues. So in the interest of being a productive member of society, Fight Game Media has all of that covered. I listen to it as I'm driving around. I'll listen to shows and I get my news, analysis, recaps on TNA, GCW, boxing, Ryan Frederick's MMA stuff. There's coverage of everything on there, Jeremy. And I know that there's even programming that's not centered around combat sports. You have a show that covers a lot of different things about, as you affectionately call it, nerd culture. There's a lot on there. And
we call that one Parallel Earth.
Parallel Earth. There you go.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great stuff. Ripping Packs. Just so much good stuff. We encourage you to check it out. Take a look. $5 a month. That's not all that much at all. It's less than, well, heck, it is less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks now, as I just figured out by ordering one of those froofy Frappuccino things the other day when it was so hot out. So cheaper than that. And believe me, it's a lot of content.
And if you are watching on YouTube, subscribe here, because there are frequently times where we put samples of those podcasts and those other contributions elsewhere up here for free. And it is excellent content, excellent insight. Our contributors are from all over the world, and they are making sure that they are putting their best work forward to make sure that you are entertained and enlightened with boxing, nerd stuff, wrestling, MMA, all the stuff. I gotta pound the message even more than Steven, because we're all invested in making sure that you enjoy the stuff that we're presenting to you. And
if you are a history nerd like myself, there's also a Fumi Saito show with Justin Nipper. It's fantastic. They go over Japanese wrestling history, and there's just wonderful stuff in there. It's really modern, historical, MMA, boxing, whatever you're into, we've got it.
Speaking of a history lesson, why don't we jump into your little segment where you enlighten us on something a little bit of the history of New Japan? What do you got for us?
Well, I'd be happy to. And I was looking at this, and of course, this is the 50th anniversary, and it's been a big part of New Japan's presentation all year. And I started thinking, like, how do they celebrate these anniversaries over time? So I went back and looked in 10-year increments back and saw what they did. Now, June, at first impression, June, you have your Dominion show, which has been around for about 14 years. And then the rest of the month is kind of quiet, building up to G1. But as it turns out, there's actually been a lot of interesting things that's happened in the month of June over the years. So I'm going to go over some of that. In 2012, Dominion was presented as a 40th anniversary event. It was heavily branded with the 40th anniversary, and there was a mix of people from all over wrestling in June 16th, 2022 at the Dominion event. And we're just going to go over it. For instance, the main event is a match that we're all very familiar with. Hiroshi Tanahashi defeated Kazuchika Okada to win the IWGP heavyweight title.
What old is new again?
Exactly. Second from the top, Togi Makabe defeated Minoru Suzuki in what was probably a brutal match that those guys probably spent a few days recovering from.
What's old is old again?
Yes. We have an interesting little tag team match here underneath that. Shinsuke Nakamura, the leader of Chaos at the time, and Masato Tanaka, if you remember that guy. You want to talk about a guy that you could hit with a wrecking ball and he would just no-sell it. They defeated an interesting tag team that you would not see today. Hirooki Goto and Tetsuya Naito were the opposition there. It's a tag team there. And this one, I got a real kick out of it. We mentioned that Chaos spent several years as a heel faction before growing warm and fuzzy, as they are now. And this goes to show you the IWGP Tag Team Championship match was set up between the champions, Tenkoji, of course, one of the great tag teams in Japanese history, Tenzan and Kojima, against the Chaos group of Takashi Iizuka and Toru Yano. Now, if you remember Iizuka, he played the wild man part for years and years. And back then, Toru Yano, of course, was just came off being one of the most violent players, tag team with Makabe. He turned on him to help form Chaos. And he and Iizuka battled to a double count out with Tenkoji in 2 minutes and 41 seconds. I'm thinking that one never really got in the ring. So then they restarted the match. And then they fought 12 minutes and 26 seconds to a no contest. Just couldn't control it, by God. Those four are just too wild. IWGP Junior Heavyweight title match was interesting. Now, Ryusuke Taguchi won the Best of the Super Juniors that year. So this is so Taguchi was still on top in that division, but he defeated Low Ki. You remember Low Ki?
I do remember Low Ki.
Yeah, he defeated Low Ki in the finals in order to get the shot at Low Ki, who was the champion. So Low Ki was going for the rare feat of winning the tournament as champion. Didn't quite do it, so he had to face Taguchi in a title match, but Low Ki retained. And then a tag team match, MVP and Shelton Benjamin defeated Carl Anderson and Tama Tonga. So a little WWE guy action in there before this was between their stints in WWE. So Carl Anderson, Tama Tonga, original Bullet Club guys right there. And then the junior heavyweight tag team titles, Jushin Thunder Liger and Tiger Mask defeated Suzuki-gun members Takamichi Noku and Taichi. So Taichi, still
young Taichi,
junior, a young Taichi and a junior back then. And that was actually a title change. So Suzuki-gun came into that one with the belts. Yoshihashi, Ishii, and Rocky Romero defeated Yuji Nagata, Watanaru Inoue, and Captain New Japan. If you, I don't know if you remember Captain New Japan, Jeremy. I
am unfamiliar with Captain New Japan.
I am trying to figure if there's an avatar for Captain New Japan now, and the closest thing might be Jado, where if you're like he's in there and he's losing the fall. That's the guy that's losing the fall. He's the baby face.
I'm going to Google this later, and we're going to talk about Captain New Japan in a history lesson. And I'm going to come back, and I'm going to be educated on Captain New Japan.
Captain New Japan, masked wrestler. Well, he's not extraordinary at all. I was going to say extraordinary. That's inaccurate.
The thing you hear on the summer solstice, Captain New Japan. Okay.
He was doomed, Jeremy. You know what happened to him is he turned heel on New Japan, my God, and became the first Bone Soldier. Taiji Ishimori took the Bone Soldier character from him. from him after he bombed out so bad as a heel that he ended up out of the business. So
I'm gonna say politely, not everything can be a home run when you're creative. Not
I
everything
think
can
you're
be a
right.
home run.
That was one where Gato had to just be sitting there just going, oh boy, I messed that one up. That was
Yeah,
not my day. And the opening match,
Okay.
and I'm not going to run down the card every single
Sure,
time. I
no.
just thought this one was fascinating.
The standouts are standing out. I
Yes,
can
the
promise
standouts
you.
are okay. First match on the card.
Yeah.
Kota Ibushi, Kenny Omega, the Golden Lovers, teaming up with Daisuke Sasaki, and they defeated Prince Devitt, Kushida, and Bushi.
Huh.
Interesting 6-man tag team match right there to open that event right there from.
What, 12 minutes?
Very close. 10 minutes, 48 seconds.
All right.
So, yeah. So that was 10 years ago. So I wanted to go back 20 years ago. Now, 20 years ago is a very interesting time in New Japan. 2002. This was when mixed martial arts had basically taken over the market in Japan.
Okay.
So there was a very hot period in the late 90s. All Japan, New Japan, other companies on fire, selling out everything they touched. And this, if you look back at like 1994 through 1996, I might not have that exact, certainly 1996, but late 90s, Japan was on fire. Just the crowds were going berserk for things. All Japan was in some sort of streak where they sold out every show they did in Tokyo for years and years at a time, just packed the houses, no matter what building they were in. New Japan was running basically quarterly Tokyo Dome events for a while. That's how big they were. So all these things started coming up. UFC, Pride was a big one in Japan, started selling out the Tokyo Dome all the time. All these kickboxing events, K1 was a big deal. And it started bleeding over, pardon the pun, into Japan. Of course, they had UWFI, which was presented as if it were quote unquote real, but wasn't. It was a worked shoot company. And you started seeing a big mix of MMA into pro wrestling, especially New Japan, because Antonio Inoki was always he was like one of the original MMA guys, wrestler fighting a boxer and things. It damn near killed New Japan. Fact of the matter is, it didn't work. They would have all these things where, okay, here's a shoot match. And then with the obvious implication being, okay, the next one's a fake one. If you sit there and tell you that, well, these matches are going to be real, what does that say about the ones you don't say that for? And then it almost killed New Japan. This was the beginning of, or it was in a downhill slide that would go very, very far downhill, really until Tanahashi began to pull it out. Tanahashi became a star and began to bring crowds up again. And then the Okada rivalry and things grew and grew, and Naito.
And so this was before Brock Lesnar and MVP and all those guys were showing up.
But we're starting to see a little bit of it. So the IWGP heavyweight title was the main event here in this show at Budokan Hall, which drew 9,000, which is a good crowd. But they've been drawing 14,000, which is about what Budokan Hall holds, only a couple of years before. They would have packed the place. Now there's 5,000 empty seats. It would get a lot worse than this. There would be fewer than 9,000 at a couple of the Wrestle Kingdoms. So moving on to that, Yuji Nagata was the champion and defended against Kensuke Sasaki, who was a now retired but a terrific heavyweight in New Japan. That would have been a terrific main event. But you had Yoshihiro Takayama, who of course had that legendary match in Pride with Don Fry, where they destroyed each other's brain cells with one of the craziest fights you'll ever see in your life. Very real fight. He defeated Manabu Nakanishi. You had Masahiro Chono and Scott Norton beating Kenzo Suzuki and Hiroshi Tanahashi, a very young Tanahashi, 2002. And Bas Rutten, an MMA legend, defeated Mayasuke Naruse by referee stoppage. So here we're getting into that MMA style of match in the middle of a pro wrestling card. There were some other things here. I'm not going to read all these matches because a lot of these names you probably wouldn't recognize. Some are just flat out MMA guys. But you had Koji Kanemoto, Akira, Black Tiger number 3. Black Tiger 3 was Silver King, also the brother of Dr. Wagner Jr., so Mexican star. And they teamed with Gato to face Jushin Thunder Liger, Minoru Tanaka, and Tiger Mask, the current Tiger Mask, he's been around for a long time. So that was one of the matches on there. So
was that Dr. Wagner Jr. brother, the one that passed away a couple years ago of a heart attack in London?
Yeah, that's right. Silver King. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, absolutely. And Riki Choshu was the champion in 1992, but doesn't look like he was on this card right here. So backing things up, I mentioned that before that they were in this little period of time when they were on fire. Excuse me, that was Nagata in 1992. I'm going back 10 more years when Riki Choshu held the title. Sorry about that. Back to the Budokan Hall, sold out, 14,214 fans. There are some interesting names on this show. So we're going all the way back, and they're packing the houses for everything. Riki Choshu defeated Masa Chono, so a battle of two absolute legends right there. Second from the top, Jeremy, we just had RK Bro and the Usos combining tag team titles. We're going to see Great-O-Khan and Jeff Cobb against FTR versus Roppongi Vice. Winner take all, two different promotions titles on the line. We've seen it with AAA and AEW. Here's an early version of it. WCW tag team champions Rick and Scott Steiner defeated IWGP tag team champions, get ready for this one, Big Van Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow, and captured both championships. Vader and Bigelow were both literally and figuratively as draws, a monster tag team in Japan. And the Steiner brothers against Vader and Bigelow would have been a monster match.
And what year was this? One more time?
1992. So the Steiners
prime time for everybody.
Everybody, absolutely right. Okay. And Vader, of course, Inoki made Vader as a monster. First match in for Vader, he squashed all-time legend Antonio Inoki. Squashed him. It didn't sell a thing for him, pinned him in the middle of the ring when Inoki never got pinned by anybody. Bam Bam Bigelow, of course, did his act of being super agile for a big man. They were over as hell. And then the Steiner brothers came in and beat him here. We also had El Samurai defeating Jushin Thunder Liger to win the junior heavyweight title. That's a great rivalry. There are some of their matches, I think, on YouTube, unless they've been pulled down by New Japan World. Fabulous stuff. You saw, here's one earlier on, the Great Kokina and the Wild Samoan. Jeremy, any idea who those two are? And I will be very impressed with you. 1992, we'll give you a bit of a clue. Great Kokina and, Wild Samoan. I mean, there's so many Samoans, and there were a lot of Samoans in the 90s.
I'm not going to try. Please just enlighten me.
Great Kokina, Yokozuna.
Oh, damn it.
He was Kokina Maximus for a while.
I had Yokozuna as one of them. Like, no, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, the Wild Samoan was Samu from the Samoan SWAT team and the Head Shrinkers.
Oh,
So
fortune favors the bold, and I should have been bold.
There you go. So they defeated Scott Norton and the Killer B. Brian Blair was getting a Japanese tour out of that. So
yeah, paycheck and a shot at the lake.
I have a feeling he's the one that was pinned in that match. I don't think it was Scott Norton that did the job in that one. Super Strong Machine defeated Pegasus Kid, which in 7 minutes and 37 seconds, that's Chris Benoit.
I remember Pegasus Kid. I was like, Pegasus Kid, was that Jericho or Benoit? Jericho or Benoit?
Yeah,
Benoit.
It was Benoit before he lost the mask. And I think he was Wild Pegasus without the mask there. So yeah.
I have to apologize, but there is Chris Charlton's brother did a series of line drawing books about the Super J Cup. And a lot of the education that I had was reading those and really getting an idea of those 7 championship tournament, the cup that they were doing. Sorry, I don't mean to go on the tangent.
No, that's fine.
It was one of those things where when you do these history lessons and you're able to tie together things that you already know, it makes the history feel more real.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to bring up the 1982 Summer Fight Series. That was the tour that was going on. Now we backed up before Dominion even was a thing. Now we backed all the way up before the IWGP title was a thing. In 1982, they did not have a singles championship. Strange thing.
Wow.
They did not have one. Inoki held the World Martial Arts title that he would put up when he would have his big singles matches, but there was not there was for the first, I don't know, 12 years of the company, there was, or 13 years, 11 or 12 years of the company, there was not a New Japan champion or an IWGP champion. That didn't become a thing until about 83, I believe.
Then I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
When they do the montage of champions before an IWGP World Heavyweight Championship match, does that include the World Martial Arts champions, or is it really only the IWGP champions on?
I think it's just the IWGP titles. I think it is, and not even all of them, really, because I mean that montage would get pretty long now. But yeah, it pretty much just covers the. And really, I don't know that Inoki ever actually lost that title. I think it was just like a title that he.
Yeah, it was like I was curious to see how they translate the legacy and their history outward.
And it is an interesting thing. So they do have that, and they've pretty much started that with the IWGP lineage in the mid '80s there. So this is before that, the Summer Fight Series. So before they had all this, they would do these tours, and they would regularly bring over a smattering of foreign wrestlers, usually from the United States, Canada, a couple from England sometimes, and they would be the menacing heels to the native Japanese stars and heroes. So for the most part, the Japanese guys were the good guys, the non-Japanese guys were the bad guys, for the most part. And you would really see more of the Japanese versus Japanese in the prelims, not so much late in the card. All Japan did this too. And but the main events were usually the Japanese guys against foreign heels. It was really, like, I would say, and they would have other matches like tournaments and things like that where Japanese would wrestle Japanese. The first real feud was Tenryu and Choshu, where Choshu kind of formed a faction and turned heel on Tenryu, which was a sensation because they really hadn't seen Japanese people like hate each other in a blood feud before that. 1982, they were still doing that. So here were some of the foreign stars they brought over for this. One in particular would end up, it was right in a sweet spot. You'll see what I mean. For the Summer Fight Series, Dick Murdoch, terrific wrestler from the United States, El Canek, Mexican legend right there, Scott McGee, who was a really good technical wrestler, but a mid-card guy, really, mostly from Mid-Atlantic and some in WWF, Ultraman, again, from Mexico, but the big one, Hulk Hogan. Now, Hulk Hogan was the number one babyface for the AWA by then. He kind of came in 1981, went straight to the top of the AWA, but he was still doing very well for New Japan and was a big draw for Inoki. He actually wrestled Andre the Giant. And I'm looking the old Sumo Hall, not the current one, but the one before that one. That kicked off the tour. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant went to a double countout. Andre worked heel in New Japan. So in Hokkaido, Andre and Dick Murdoch as heels wrestled the heroes Inoki and Hulk Hogan in a tag team match. Interesting fact about this one, this is June of 1982. Rocky III came out May 28th, 1982 in the States. So this is coming right off him being the number one babyface in the AWA and having a hit movie out at the same time and going over here and making, depending on who you're talking to, somewhere $10,000 to $15,000 a week working for New Japan. And if you listen to Hulk Hogan, $15 million a week. But you can't take anything he says seriously. But nevertheless, this was a time Hulk Hogan, right after Rocky III came out, he's wrestling Andre the Giant in Japan and teaming with the biggest star in New Japan, Antonio Inoki. So not a bad time to be Hulk Hogan, Jeremy.
You know, that's when you're living on top of the world right there. And, you know, there is a reason that Hulk Hogan has the legendary status that he has. And it's not a huge part of it, but stuff like this is a part of it. You know, like he has the national appeal, but there's a worldwide appeal for a reason. And stuff like this, you know, being so present in New Japan and having a stint in there that, you know, he could go from, I've never seen a New Japan match by Hogan, but from what I've heard, he can go. And so give him his flowers when it comes to his New Japan work.
In the AWA, he was already basically doing the act he would do in the WWF.
Right.
But in Japan, they do look different. And there are some of them on there where he's wrestling both with and against Inoki in various things. He would end up actually winning the first ever IWGP tournament, which is the predecessor of the G1. It was the International Wrestling Grand Prix is what that stands for, and that was the name of the tournament. Then they made a championship out of it later. But Hogan actually won the first one, so he was adopted by the Japanese fans very early. They went crazy for him. Even when he was a heel, he was almost like Bruiser Brody in All Japan, where he was a heel that people just loved to see do just wreak havoc and things. And of course, he won the first IWGP by clotheslining. His big move was the clothesline, the lariat, and he in Japan it was, and he lariated Antonio Inoki to the floor. Inoki was on the apron, and he clobbered him with this clothesline, and he splattered to the floor and lost by count out to Hogan, and that was the tournament win. So Hogan, monster star in Japan, and this is about the best time of one of the best times of his career, really. I mean, he'd have great times at WWF, but this was a sweet spot for him with the movie coming out.
I promised myself that the first time you'd ever mention Grand Prix, I'd tell the audience that when we were workshopping titles for this show, that I was really pushing hard for New Japan Grand Prix cap, and it was just too clever, just too clever for that. But
it lasted a while. It was in the discussion.
It was a finalist, but we'll save that one for a rainy day somewhere else.
I'm going to finish my history lesson now by going. I will finish the history lesson going back. Since we talked about this 50th anniversary, well, 1972, 10 years earlier. We're only 3 months into the existence of this company, Jeremy. It is not a major promotion quite yet, and you'll see what I mean. So, in only 10 years, they were booking Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Dick Murdoch. Like I said, Scott McGee was a pretty darn good wrestler, but they're getting guys like El Canek. I mean, legends, absolute Hall of Fame guys. Not so much in 1972 with the foreign guys coming in. I think that he didn't quite have the cachet that the others did. Now, he would fairly soon. Lou Thez actually came in like 73, 74. So did Carl Gotch. So we're starting to get some big time names from Inoki's contacts when he was with the Japanese Wrestling Association before the split. Of course, famously, Inoki went off and created New Japan in 1972. Baba created All Japan in 1972. Off we went. And JWA just kind of faded away. So, but 3 months into New Japan's tenure, they were not booking the biggest names in the business. The foreign talent in the 1972 opening series is what this tour was called. Eddie Sullivan, who was a journeyman wrestler who had a very long career all around the South. Rip Tyler, same, another guy that was pretty much a journeyman wrestler. And a guy named John Furr, Furr. So those were most. And now Jim Grabmeyer, he was a WWF guy for a long time in the mid-70s. And Rick Neal, who would be Ricky Fields, a not much more than enhancement talent, I'd say, in Georgia and throughout Alabama and some other territories. So that was who the foreign guys were. There was some work to be done there, wasn't there? Oh, and Jesse James. Jesse James had like a 20-year career, but again, not particularly in main events. These guys were the journeyman guys that going over there and getting a Japanese paycheck looked preferable maybe to jerking curtains around North Carolina.
From your knowledge and research into this, is it more of a case of these are the guys that New Japan could get, or was it a case that New Japan didn't know what to look for at first?
I think this was what they could do and probably what they could afford. I don't think that New Japan was in a position to really hire the best talent and pay the best talent at this point. So they got some guys that were good hands. I mean, these guys, all the guys I talked about had like 10-year careers or 20-year careers in wrestling. So these are guys who are perfectly capable, or else they wouldn't have lasted that long, right? So they didn't really main event, but maybe they could get these guys a little bit cheaper than they could get the stars that they would be booking soon. And once they got a little bit of momentum, by 1973, 1974, much, much bigger stars were coming over. I think it was more of a matter of they booked some really good people. Like I mentioned Thez and Gotch, but there's more than that. And there are other guys like, Stan Hansen was still in the mid to late 70s before he went over to All Japan. I think they knew what to look for. I think they knew who were good, but I think they also knew they couldn't pay them. And 3 months in, so they guys like Antonio Inoki, Toyonobori, let's see, Osamu Kido, these and Tatsumi Fujinami as a very young man there. They had the ingredients. I think they just needed to get a little momentum going.
Okay.
And then they could afford some better stars because it was not long. And we'll see as we go through these little history lessons that they were bringing in some pretty solid names pretty quick. I think he knew what to look for, and just needed to gather up just some savings. Only 3 months into the business, he was probably wondering if he was going to make it.
I will be very interested either doing the research on my own, which I can do from time to time, even though you know most of the history lessons. But history lesson wise, understanding the dynamics of Japanese booking coming to the States looking for talent.
Yeah.
Were they welcome with open arms? Was it kind of like none of the territories were really going to give them guys just because it was a fledgling territory in Japan? Those are the kind of things that I'm like, dynamically, politically, those are curiosities when you tell me these stories. And that's what should get these like questions going in the future is what was it like back then when you tell me these things? And what was the culture of wrestling worldwide in terms of interacting with each other?
Well,
Fascinating stuff.
I feel like a lot of these guys, especially in 1972, were between territories at that point. I don't think that it was necessarily that they were calling up Jim Crockett and say, hey, who can you send me? I think, well, Jim Grabmeyer might have been between WWF runs and between a run in WWF and Mid-Atlantic, or John Furr might have been between Atlanta and the southeastern territory in Alabama. It might have been a thing where I've got a couple of weeks free. I can go over and work a tour for you. Later on, it got a lot more complicated. I mean, part of Hulk Hogan's deal with Vern Gagne and the AWA is, hey, you can't pay me a week what they can. So I'm going to take these New Japan dates. And, if you want me around them, that's fine. And Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody did the same things. Like they would be here for 4 or 5 weeks, but they were going back to Japan for a few. And because they did pay the foreign stars very, very well. So it evolved over time.
Yes, a system. Thank you for the history lesson. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. No, that was
now you got to 72. All right, so we are going to wrap up with hot breaking news coming out of the shows from New Japan. We have block assignments for the G1.
Indeed, we do.
Do you have the brackets in front of you?
I do.
Why don't you go ahead and do the A block and the C block, and I'll follow with the B block and the D block.
Sounds good. All right. So I will start with A, and it has Kazuchika Okada, Toru Yano, Jeff Cobb, Lance Archer, Bad Luck Fale, Filthy Tom Lawler, and Jonah. I think this is an intriguing block, Jeremy. Did you want to read them off at once and then
we'll talk about this block. We'll go through the block and we'll just kind of move on to the next one after that.
First thing that comes to mind is it seems to me, based off of the New Japan Cup and history, that this one's going to come down to Okada and Cobb. To me, that's what it looks like to me. Now, I think that Lance Archer and Bad Luck Fale will probably do well. I'm very curious as to how we're going to find out where Tom Lawler and Jonah are in the pecking order when it comes to Gato and how he books guys in Japan. We know where they are in New Japan Strong. They're two of the bigger stars on that show. We still don't really know how Gato fully thinks about the strong guys and where they are in the order. How these guys finish in this tournament is going to tell them a lot about, because these are two of the biggest stars on Strong. If they go a couple of points here and there, then we'll know what Gato's thinking about what Strong is. It's a keep busy thing. But I have a feeling that Jonah in particular is probably going to do okay. I'm curious to see that Jonah Bad Luck Fale match.
There's a lot of big mean guys in this bracket,
and Jonah versus Cobb too. Pardon me, that one even more.
Jonah and Cobb had a face off recently, and it just made you want it more.
Absolutely.
So this should be interesting. And if you want to know where that was an episode of New Japan Strong a few weeks back. Also, complete as an aside, speaking of Tom Lawler, this weekend on New Japan Strong is his title match against Fred Rosser that aired in Philadelphia. If you want to know why Tom Lawler is in the G1, watch this match. Anyways, A block to me seems like it is yelling out Kazuchika Okada to move on to the bracket. I would not discount Jeff Cobb, and I wouldn't discount Lance Archer from being threat towards the end. It does seem like this entire bracket is designed to play spoilers to the top 3 contenders with Cobb, Okada, and you could flip back and forth between Lawler and Jonah, like you were saying, as to what the pecking order would be. But to me, this looked like Okada making it to the next bracket, and then his fate being decided there.
All right.
So
go ahead.
B block is going to be Jay White, Tomohiro Ishii, Hanada, Tama Tonga, Great Okan, Chase Owens, and Taichi. Woo! There sure seems like Jay White's gonna clear that bracket. And the only other person that I would see having potential, but boy, if the bloom off the rose on him, would be Hanada.
Could be. I also think Ishii might sneak through here. They like Ishii, and they usually treat him well in the G1. We'll see how it goes. Here's my prediction on this one. I don't. Okay, I'm going to make my little spoiler. I think Tama Tonga is going to pin Jay White in block action in this one.
That's a great suggestion. Jay White needs to lose at least one match, and because Tomohiro Ishii beat him for the never openweight title back in November, I'm skeptical that Ishii is going to be the guy to beat him in this block. But they might. There's only a few guys that are at the level of being credible. We were talking about earlier is like having the credibility and the cachet that you're in this match, you winning this match, all the things that check off the boxes of what feels right. Tama Tonga beating Jay White, I see every reason why you would do it. It would give him an opportunity at a title shot later on afterward when we're in a little bit of a quiet phase. I don't think that that's necessarily as bold of a call that, I wouldn't have thought of it, but now that you did it, I'm going to give you all the credit in the world when it happens.
Makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it? And it could be a thing where that loss is how Sonata sneaks in to the block, and especially if Jay White's the champion. And in this format, because you have the block winners as semifinals and then finals, you can have the champion advance that far. He could come out of the block with the belt. We don't know if he's going to leave Forbidden Door with the title.
Have they made it clear that A block is facing B block in the
I don't think advancement? I don't know if they've said specifically. I don't know
if an Okada Jay White match inside the block is necessarily the best idea, but it could also be the way that Jay White doesn't move forward in the tournament.
Yeah, I'm while you talk about the I'm going to look that up though. I'm going to see if they've already decided who faces who. I can look that up at some point.
Okay, so I'll do the C block while you're going through that, and I'll do that. Keep talking. So we got the C block. We have the current contender for the interim AEW championship, Hiroshi Tanahashi, versus his rival for that spot, Hiroki Goto. We also have Tetsuya Naito, Zack Sabre Jr., Aaron Hanare, Kenta, and Evil. Woo! This is what we're gonna call the pick'em block. It is anybody's game based off of the level of cachet and talent and parity. I think parity is the word that I'm looking for here. Naito's always the contender. Zack Sabre Jr. is having a tremendous year. We have had both of those guys face Okada in the other bracket earlier this year. So that is something to keep in mind if they are advancing forward into this tournament. If I'm going to go with Naito.
Naito feels right, doesn't it? And Tanahashi and Zack, I think it's going to be one of those where they're in, and those three it'll come down to those three.
I don't discount Evil. He's there, and he's currently in a position of he threatens, and he doesn't have as much bite as he used to. But man, this is the kind of thing where you're going to be infuriated by his performance in this thing.
And the way they book Evil too, he could beat anyone at any time because they have all the breath bumps and the interference and things, and someone could get hit in the head with a chair or a wrench or a million other things. So you can't discount him beating anyone like you can, like, well, they're never going to put Yujiro Takahashi over blah blah blah. They're never going to put over Chase Owens is only going to go, well, he beat Tanahashi last year, so I guess even then. But with that Bullet Club interference thing that they've been doing, it is always possible for him to get a victory over anyone.
Do you when we have the match of Kenta versus Evil, do you think either one of them gets cheered?
Oh boy, that's interesting. I don't know who they would go for in that one. I don't know. The crowd really seems irritated by Kenta, doesn't it? Like they just seem irrationally irritated by Kenta, the New Japan fans.
I'm curious to see when he's actually in a ring and he wants them to get behind him, considering how much he put his body on the line. If the audience will look past it when they're like told, hey, just look past it for this match.
I still think they will probably root for Kenta a little bit over Evil, just because I think the fans in Japan are as irritated by the House of Torture as we are.
I think you're probably right.
So Block D, we both agree that Block C is kind of wide open among those three guys. Mm-hmm. Block D, I think, is a lot easier to pick between two.
Yes.
We have Will Ospreay, Shingo Takagi. So we're in with some of my favorites. Juice Robinson, Yoshihashi, El Phantasmo, Yujiro Takahashi, and David Finlay. Juice is going to get a little love because he's getting pushed as a heel. He will probably do pretty well in this tournament. The other four are there, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. This, I mean, just screams either Ospreay or Shingo.
I think it's Ospreay.
You think Ospreay?
I think it's Ospreay. I think there's a real chance that it might be Ospreay and Jay White at the Tokyo Dome. There's just a lot going on that there's not a whole lot of fresh, big final boss matches that are going on in this thing. That was part of the problem with not as many AEW people and the way that they've separated these brackets, which we'll talk about that stuff on the next show because there's a lot that we already had to digest on this one. And now that we have a better idea of what this is going to be with the math introduced by Chris Samsa about how match quantity, length, total things. I've looked at it, but I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I know it's less matches, but the quality and the health of the performers will probably be greater consistently, and I can live with that. Will Ospreay and Shingo Takagi, to me, seem like the two big options. I also don't think Juice Robinson is going to be in the G1, but until we hear otherwise, we're just going to imagine that Juice Robinson is in the G1.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I mean, they have until July 16th, so almost a month, but that's pushing it. Yeah, that's fair enough. He might not get there. Yeah. But if Shingo Takagi had lost that King of Pro Wrestling Provisional Championship to Taichi at Dominion, he would be my pick to win the G1. Just because I think it's just about his time to win one of these things. But with the King of Pro Wrestling title, I think they have other ideas for that, and some of their the stipulations, which have gone from goofy with Toru Yano to something a little more innovative with the referee counts. A 1 count gets you 1 point, 2 count gets you 2 points, stuff like that they've been doing, which I haven't been enjoying. It's nice to see something a little bit different that isn't like lock your opponent in a dog cage type of crap.
There's been some good concepts with there for sure.
Yeah, and I think that they have some other ideas for that, which to me kind of, I think they have those ideas for Shingo, so you don't necessarily do the G1 thing with him, but he's going to win one of these years. But yeah, I feel like this could be the time that Ospreay captures it.
Here's how I feel about Shingo. I think they struck while the iron was hot last year and put him in a position to succeed, and he did exceptionally well, but he wasn't part of the long-term plan. And so they are doing what they can to keep him in a position of prominence. But again, he was never part of the plan.
And then, and I do see that A and B are supposed to face each other in the semifinals, and C and D are going to be facing each other in the semifinals. That's what the information I have in front of me here. So
to me, that says Jay White and Okada in the semi, Naito and Ospreay in a semi, or Naito and Shingo. And then Naito and Shingo, you have an LIJ kind of thing there. But again, Naito, anybody could be in that pick'em too. Like it doesn't have to, it could be Zack Sabre Jr. I do think that Okada would beat Jay White and then lose to somebody in the other bracket to keep Jay White away from that challenger until Wrestle Kingdom.
Anytime Okada goes into a G1 without the title, you have to think he's a very strong contender to win it. Again, going back to what we've talked about with him being Gato's safety blanket, it's still hard to imagine. And I guess we're going to find out during G1 if they're doing 1 or 2 nights of the Tokyo Dome. I don't think they've decided that yet.
You never know. They might even do a Forbidden Door on a night of Wrestle Kingdom.
Maybe, they could do a lot of different things.
Yeah,
but
so
Okada not being in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom still sounds odd to me. But especially because I don't feel like they really have 2 other guys that are bigger stars ready. So I still think Okada could win this thing. But I think if it were me, I think it would be Ospreay's year. But
he's having a tremendous year. He's got a story about a title that he feels he never rightly lost. If they put in some of those fuck finishes where he loses a match in his bracket and is threatened via like a referee mess up, I mean, you have that story in there. I'm going to call that one now that they at one of his matches that he might end up, the drama of the photo finish. Part of his photo finish will be referee incompetence, if you will.
And then the question is, if he wins the G1, what do you do with the U.S. title? So,
I mean, there's time here and there.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting next 2 weeks. I asked you this to wrap up last time. On an excitement level, how do you feel about Forbidden Door?
I am excited about Forbidden Door. Tomorrow night on Dynamite is going to tell the real tale of how excited I am. If it turns out we are getting Danielson and Zach, it goes up 4 notches. If we get Danielson and Zach and Okada, I can't wait. Already, I think it's going to be a good show. But I feel like without Danielson, without Okada, it's lacking some star power that it could have. And if those 2 are added in, I'm enough of a fan of the people involved that I'm going to be watching either way, but that would make a big difference to me if we can get that dream match. We need a dream match. We're getting one kind of with Moxley and Tanahashi. Certainly Zach and Danielson is one. And if we can get Okada in that main event, I'll be a very happy man. So if it just goes off as it is now, I'll think, well, it'll probably be a fun show with some good matches, but maybe not the memorable event that it could have been. And if they add those in, I think we could be in for a real treat.
Yeah, I'm kind of simmering at the same energy level I was a couple of weeks ago, and that has a lot to do with some pretty inexplicable episodes of Dynamite and some booking of New Japan that went left when you thought right, and you had to temper your own expectations. But I think you're right. After Friday night, I think I'm going to be ready to watch this show and ready to talk about it with excitement and enthusiasm when we're all done.
And there's going to be some, speaking of strong style presence, right after Forbidden Door, because Power Bombshells, that we have our sibling show here on the YouTube channel, Sam and Mel. Mel is going to be at Forbidden Door, and Sam is going to be doing a show right after, and I'm going to be on it. Are you going to be on that one, Jeremy?
I'm not going to be there unless you guys go a little bit later, which I was telling you guys, don't wait for me, because there's going to be excitement and people are going to want to talk about it right away, and I want you guys to talk about it right away.
Well, if you're able to drop by, that'd be great. If not, I get to be a guest on Power Bombshells.
Yes,
with Sam, which I'm excited about.
The crossover between you two, I'm going to definitely tune in and watch as soon as I get home, because I won't be watching the show here.
Yeah.
I'll be going out.
Oh boy,
hanging out with the friends.
Oh, all right. Well, it'll be an exciting night either way. So, anything else that you wanted to add, Jeremy, or do we want to go into our socials here?
Yeah, you can find me at Jer Finestone on the Twitters. I will be posting this on YouTube soon and in some places. If you have an idea where you'd like to see this show posted in better places, hit me up on that Twitter. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, very much so. We definitely appreciate you staying with us. I am SM Conway 88 on Twitter. I am the writer of ringsidereplay.com, my history website, and check out my writing on WWE and New Japan on fightgamemedia.com. And I'm going to get our names right this time, Jeremy. That's Jeremy Finestone. I'm Stephen Conway. See, I nailed it. And we'll be seeing you soon on Power Bombshells, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with more. Speaking of strong styles, we careen toward G1. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.